The Wilds Files is an immigration law podcast. The content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any organization or law firm. Listeners should seek the counsel of a qualified attorney to address specific legal concerns. By listening, you acknowledge that the hosts and guests are not providing professional or personalized legal advice. Welcome to the Wilds Files. The files are open.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Wilds Files, your go-to podcast for everything related to U.S. immigration law. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Wilds, and it's a pleasure to have you back. Today, we have someone really dear to us. She's an incredibly talented lawyer, one of the best in our litigation team, one of our senior associates, Mia. Welcome, Mia. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. So happy to have you here, and I know you're really busy, so thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
Things are crazy nowadays, aren't they?
Insane.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why don't you share with our listeners and our viewers very quickly your name, where you're from, just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Mia Ganotice-Olis. I am originally from Philippines, by way of Hawaii and Miami, Florida, Northwest Florida.
It sounds like a lot of oceans. Do you like to surf? Is that like one of your biggest hobbies? Do you love the ocean?
Actually, I do. I'm not a great swimmer, and I learned how to surf before I started to swim.
Really?
Yeah, which is kind
That's
of a
crazy.
metaphor with lawyering, I think.
Right. That is true. And how long have you been practicing for?
About 13 years, I'd say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So Mia's part of our litigation team. I mean, you kind of overlap between the family team as well, but you really are a litigator, I think, by all definitions of the word. So what does that mean? What is litigation in the context of immigration?
Right. So I guess in the adversarial system in immigration court, we are the defense attorneys for those who are in removal or deportation proceedings.
So kind of like a triangle. You have the judge who's down the middle, let's say.
Sure.
And then we're on the other side of the bench representing the individual or the corporation or whatever it may be. And then you have, ICE prosecutors on the other side?
Yep.
Okay.
They are the Office of the Principal Legal Advisors. They're fancy term for ICE attorneys.
Yeah. Well, ICE is part of the Department of Homeland Security, obviously. There's a lot of different agencies that are there. And OPLA, or the Office of Principal Legal Advisor, is just one part of that. So they're representing, they're kind of the prosecutors, like we mentioned this. Do you like being in court?
I do. I come from a theater background, and I think because of that, I feel very comfortable in a situation where it does ask for you to step out of a more, I guess, to have a personality in front of the court, if only to.
Well, it's like putting on a show, right? You're advocating in front of a judge.
Right. So we don't want to in any way overshadow the case or our clients, but it does give the court a little bit to hold on to.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's a big difference in terms of immigration court versus maybe like a criminal court where there's a jury. Because when there's a jury, you really want the jury to connect with you. You want them to be sympathetic not only to your case, but also to you as a lawyer. Whereas here, it's really just you, your client, the prosecutor on the other side, and just the judge.
Right, and sometimes it's a connection between you and the client.
Yeah.
Because, as you are sitting there doing your line of questioning, especially if you have a translator, you kind of lose the spirit of or the energy. As the case is ongoing, there is a lot of kind of like dead air because as the translation is going, the judge is losing a little bit of the attention. And so to kind of redirect that energy, I've noticed you do have to keep yourself engaged and keep the court engaged. And even the government attorney, I've seen a government attorney before look through their dating app.
While in court?
Yeah, because it was I think to a certain degree it becomes a little bit like, oh, I'm not part of this,
Right. What do you mean when you're asking your client all of the questions? They kind of just feel removed and they can kind of zone out a little bit.
Exactly. Or if sometimes they already have their cross-examination questions prepared, they don't feel the need to jump in. and or take notes or make objections. And just as what Josh was saying, it is very different than in criminal court where there is an audience or a jury to play to. Here, it's really about keeping that connection with your client, because if you are boring, the client kind of just, like I said, there is a lot to be said about the energy that happens in a courtroom, even if it's just the four of you and whatnot. There's a lot to be said with that. You want the judge to not just pay attention to the case at large and the legal arguments, but also to feel that engagement and that connection, because a lot of it is discretionary, right? A lot of the reliefs that we put forth in front of the court rests on the court. The judge is given so much authority to exercise his or her discretion, and we want that on our side.
And I think one of the interesting things about being in litigation in the immigration world is that you really are in court a lot. I don't remember the exact number, so please nobody quote me on it, but I remember from law school someone telling me something about like 95 or 99% of cases settle and don't actually go to court. Now, immigration is the exception. I don't think that statistic includes immigration because we're in court all the time. And it's just, especially nowadays with everything going on and, the way the law is being enforced, let's say, we're there pretty much, weekly at least. And there's some firms that are there daily. So why don't you tell me just a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about, what does the courtroom look like? Imagine I've never been there before. I have to show up to court for the first time. What does the building look like? How do I get inside? Where do I go? What do I do? What do I say? I know it's a little bit, paint a picture for us.
Where do we go? We don't know because it keeps changing. For example, it depends on which courthouse we're talking about. In New York City, in Manhattan, we have two, on Varick Street and on Broadway and Duane. So
let's pretend that one. Let's say you're showing up to 26 Fed. Walk us through, not necessarily how you get there. Obviously, if you're taking a subway or a car, it's a little bit different. But when you get to the building and you're going to court, what do you see? What does the room look like? Where are the benches? Where's the judge sitting? And I know that's different every time, but
so first and foremost, you do have to get through the federal building, and it's as if you are going through an airport, because it is, federal building. They assess you as though you're checking into a federal building. So don't bring any flammables.
Just a general good piece of advice for anything.
Probably, or anything that could stab people.
Again, good piece of advice just in general.
Thank you so much. So you go in, and then you do go through a metal detector, and they make sure that nothing there. A lot of it's with anything that could sound off. I have to sometimes take off my shoes, things like that. It's very gross, but so you get through, and then you already have armed officers there to make sure that everybody is compliant. Also, I have seen people who didn't want to comply with the officers and were kind of escorted out with force. So I have seen a couple of times where the officer had come close to drawing their firearm, but because it got a little rowdy post-COVID. Especially what I wanted to say was there was a lot of confusion as to where the entrance was. For a very long time, 26 Fed was under construction. I remember a time when the whole front, where we all now use as our entrance, was just closed off, and we had to go through the back where Center Street is, where the criminal courthouses are. And there used to be an entrance just for us.
For the attorneys,
Yes, but somebody during COVID violated the protocol, and now we're relegated to the front, and we all go through there.
It ruined it for everybody.
I know. So we go, and then pre-COVID, there is a difference, pre and post-COVID, but pre-COVID, it was a madhouse. It was akin to like indictment reading in criminal court, where it's just a madhouse. You just go in, and it's just tons of your brethren and sister immigration attorneys there, and a master calendar hearing. Let's make a distinction between an individual court hearing, just so our listeners and viewers can understand. A master calendar hearing is where you're being called for essentially the reading of your case and you advise the court how you are navigating it or what kind of application you are submitting on behalf of your client. So because those only take 5 minutes, they call in, like, I don't know, before COVID, again, we would have like 50 or
Well,
80
yeah, I remember
attorneys
being in some of
each
these rooms with like
courtroom.
hundreds of people,
Yes.
you know, because you have all the attorneys, you have all the clients who are with the attorneys,
Right.
the people who are pro se, which means that they're by themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. Now it's a little bit different,
Right.
especially with WebEx.
Right, and because everybody, one of my first hearings in immigration court, I made a point to basically just watch everyone because you answer it in almost like a recitation on how you answer the allegation. So for them to even call you into immigration court, they have to send you what is called a notice to appear, and involves or includes all of the allegations against you, which you should review with your client. You should have it reviewed, and they understand what it is that they're going into court for. And when you are called by the judge regarding that piece of paper, you are then to resolve how those allegations are written, whether you are admitting to them, denying them, or how it is that you want to resolve all of
So
those
taking
allegations.
pleadings of the charges, essentially.
Correct.
Okay, so you've walked into the room, and let's say we're at this individual hearing, which is just you and your client. It's the
Right.
only one case as opposed to these other ones where there's lots of
Right.
people. You walk into the room. Where are you sitting?
So first, individual hearing is like the day. That's where the trial is happening. That's where they really are going to hear as to why you should remain in the United States lawfully, right? We actually, you're the judge. I'm the defense attorney, and you are the prosecutor.
Right.
That's how the triangle is set up.
So the judge is sitting up in the front, usually a little bit raised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty
Yeah.
general amongst
Yeah,
most
and
courts.
it's a very small courtroom because, again, we don't have a jury, right? We don't have 6 or 12 people up in a panel. It's just us. So we have a viewing area, which is like pews if you go to Christian church. It's like
benches in the back.
benches in the back where people can watch. There are certain types of cases that are closed to the public, but by and large, they are open to the public.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. Something I always found really interesting about courts is, you know, you have all those benches in the back, and then there's a bar, and then you cross the bar, and that's where the attorneys and the prosecutor and the clients and the judge, that's where all is sitting.
Right.
And a little fun fact for you, that passing the bar, you take the bar as a lawyer to become a lawyer, it allows you to actually physically pass that bar. So in order to sit in front of that bar and not be with the rest of the people in the back and represent your client, you have to actually take that bar exam and pass the bar. Yeah, interesting, right?
No, it is.
Yeah.
Actually, it is.
So you're sitting to the left, sometimes the right, the prosecutor's sitting to the right, the judge is up there in front.
Yeah.
People are dressed nice, people are dressed business casual, formal, obviously lawyers are formal. Case starts, and we could do a whole nother episode on what the case is actually like. Eventually the judge may or may not make a decision, and then you leave the courtroom. Anything else what's going through your mind when you're waiting? Let's say the judge didn't make a decision yet.
Yeah.
You're walking out of the courtroom, you know you have to wait. What's going through your mind? What's going through the client's mind?
Okay, so sometimes you kind of get an indication of how it's going.
Right.
And sometimes you kind of, you also get actually, it's now the norm where we're given a couple of minutes to speak with our opposing counsel, as it were, right? So we speak with the prosecutors before the trial even begins to see where they stand, to see if there's anything that they would stipulate or agree to that would be to hopefully the benefit of your client, right? So we go through that, and from that alone, I start taking, kind of like, oh, this is not going to be a good case, in a sense that you can tell right away if there is something that the government knows that we don't. So that kind of preoccupies you. So that conversation could sometimes work to your benefit, or kind of like cast a cloud of anxiety over you.
Right. It changes your attitude sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also helpful because a lot of the times, I having worked for the government in the past, I find it always helpful to work with the lawyers because you're able to narrow down some of the issues. So this way, when you actually start the case before the judge, you've already got some of the things out of the way. Maybe you
Yeah.
already confirmed the individual's identity, so you don't need to do that,
Right.
which might seem like it's no big deal, but sometimes it could take a while.
Right.
And just, again, the case drags on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely hear you on that, is that it could change your attitude and you
Yeah.
know which way things are going sometimes.
And I love that part of the case, actually, because I worked for a little bit on the criminal side of the law, not as a criminal, still as an attorney.
Good
Good to
yeah.
know, right? And I loved voir dire, or the interviewing of jury members to be impaneled, because you, again, I guess maybe coming from a theater background, you get to know what kind of personality you're in front of. So
Right.
it's a different prosecutor, a different government attorney for each case, sometimes from the master to an individual hearing. So you don't really know who it is that you're going to be in front of, right? And during that time when you're given the 2 minutes or so to discuss the case with your opposing counsel, you get to know the personality, and you get to a little, even just a little bit read them. And it's very rare that they're so closed off that you can't tell what kind of personality you're in front of. So that, I think, is a huge indicator as well of how empathetic they might be,
Right.
or how they would destroy certain types of aspects of your case. And then you also have to be able to, again, think on your feet on how you're going to move forward with certain lines of questioning, because this is a different personality. They prepare the case a little differently. And a lot of those, it comes from experience, but I think also it's a natural, again, connection.
Yeah.
And part of litigation, I think, is, especially trials, it's a lot of connection, and it's a lot of reading the room, reading the personality next to you, reading your client to know what it is that they might need help with, and reading the judge, because the judge can actually ask questions. They can interject at any given point. They don't need to object or anything the way that your opposing counsel would need to, just to kind of ask your client a question. The judge can take over the entire case.
Yeah, and once the judge starts getting involved and asking questions, everybody's silent, all
Yeah.
focused on the judge. It's their courtroom, so you have to
Yes.
go by the way they run it and their decorum and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So outside of the courtroom, you're doing a lot of writings, briefs, motions.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do another episode talking about some of those things that you do, but I think it's just important for everybody to know that it's not just walking into the room and making arguments like you might see on Law and Order or something like that. There's so much that goes into the case before you even open your mouth. Right? The amount of papers that we go through.
Yeah.
And sometimes our filings are like, I don't know
Yeah.
if our listeners could see, but they're boxes of evidence. It's
Yeah.
like we're putting together hundreds, if not thousands of pages
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think it's just worth, and sometimes after the case is over, you even need to substantiate some of your claims or follow up with the court with some of that writings. So, you mentioned the theater background and being in person, but, do you enjoy the writing aspect of it as well?
I do. I clerked for a judge before I dove into litigation, and she taught me how to be very straightforward. So I love the aspect of arguing. What is that word? Arguing.
Yeah.
On paper, because you get to be direct, and obviously that's where you shine with your legal knowledge, but at the same time, writing and researching, that's part of our job that I think, like I said, from an immigration litigator's perspective, it comes from years of experience, kind of like knowing how you would even direct your case as far as writing an appeal goes. It may be something that you've seen 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, researching, writing, it comes with the territory.
It's kind of like each case is its own puzzle, and it's about finding the puzzle pieces first and doing the research and then figuring out how to connect them together, and then ultimately, if the puzzle's finished at the end of the individual hearing, you did a good job.
Yeah.
Now, the last thing I want to ask you before I let you get back to work and before we get out of here is, what's that feeling like? You have an individual who's been here for a long time, going through the system.
Yeah.
Maybe they applied for asylum or some other form of relief, You win the case, the judge tells you it's granted.
Yeah.
What's that feeling like? Is it for you and the client? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the first time I won a case was I was still in law school as a student attorney, working at a clinic. And I remember just thinking, this is exactly why lawyers are arrogant. Because you feel like, well, I did and said something that changed somebody's life.
Right.
Not that we're arrogant here at Walton Weinberg, of course. We're
Right.
humble.
No, but there's that feeling of contributing to someone's life is incredible.
You just know.
Yeah.
You become so enmeshed in their lives because, as you talked about earlier, writing is not just about appellate work or, arguing. It's writing in preparation for it. It's writing their story, their narrative as preparation to go into trial. And once you understand and once you argue on their behalf and you win, there is really no other high, or as surfers would say, stoke. That's the stoke. Yeah. That's the surfer stoke as a lawyer.
I think one of the best parts about being an immigration lawyer is that feeling of winning a case and sometimes really saving people's lives, and really just making a difference. And I feel very lucky every day to be able to try and do that. And when I'm successful in doing that, I think when I say I mean we, there's really no better feeling in the world knowing that you really made a difference in somebody's life.
Right. It's humbling, but also empowering. And like I said, the first time that it happened, it was sort of just like, oh my God, like you really do feel like a rock star.
Yeah.
But the more that it happens, and this is now the fourth presidency that I've practiced in this field, and it's different for each administration. So there are cases that you win, and you know that you won it against all odds, and that's when it's not just, it's a deeper sense of victory. When you've been doing it for a while and you've seen the times go through.
Right. Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier, and sometimes winning is not the end. If it goes to the appeals and stuff like that. And again, that's something we plan for talking about later. Anything else? Any last minute thoughts?
No.
All right. Awesome, Mia. It's thank you so much again. We appreciate all the work you do. Like I said, you're really changing people's lives. Thank you, everybody, for listening again. Welcome back to the Wilds Files. This file is officially closed, and we'll see you next time.